Well, again, I wasn't trying to be dramatic. So I can honestly say I think I know everybody in here, which is great. Yeah, I feel like regular pastor, but I'm not. That guy and that girl. Hey, you. So I want to talk about patience. And I was telling them back there when I was working on that video just a moment ago that there's only a few times I can watch that. I sped it up a little bit. I added extra noise and horns honking and all kinds of stuff just to create the chaos of sitting in traffic and being impatient, because we get impatient a lot. So let me give you a little bit of a backstory here. And my light is bright so I can not have to see you. So I see where you are. That's about it. But I originally wrote this, what I was going to say tonight, I wrote this back in early February. And 3 weeks ago, I was in the sound booth, and God told me to start over because what I had written didn't sound like me. It was too textbook, it was too rigid, it was too cold. It wasn't relatable, and I didn't include much of my personal story. So I rewrote it this week. You have to be obedient, right? So, just a few days into this. So patience and waiting, they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, don't they? If God showed us the whole journey, though, we wouldn't even take the first step. Right? Through all your suffering, trials, and tribulations, God is preparing you. So God knows what we need, and if He wants us to wait and be patient, it's always for our good. Our calling is simply faithfulness. It's not exciting to be patient and wait, but as we wait, God is preparing us for what's ahead. Realizing why God makes us patiently wait and what He's doing through the waiting is the start of trusting Him in this tension between waiting and the preparation for our season ahead. So sometimes, I think, is this one of my slides? Yes. I wanted this real big and bold. Sometimes God asks us to wait for something even though He's promised it to us. So we have to be patient. Have you ever had times in your life where you found yourself wondering, how long, Lord? How long will these struggles and disappointments last? How long will we have these financial difficulties? How long will these health issues persist? How long will the difficulties in this relationship last? How long will I struggle with this addiction? How long will these intense temptations last? How long will it take me to get over this loss? Psalm 27:14. I'll have to go to that right now. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage and wait for the Lord. Sounds simple enough, right? So how does your patience look right now? Are you impatient? Are you ready to learn patience? Because I'm certainly trying to learn it. Every week I get an allergy shot at work, and my nurse down the hall, Nurse Denise, we talk sometimes and say a little prayer here and there. And she said, James, don't ever pray for patience. I said, why not? She said, just don't. Trust me, you don't. And I said, why not? Isn't that one of the fruits of the Spirit? Why wouldn't you pray for that? So I've been praying for it for a very long time. And I haven't perfected it yet, but I'm getting there. So in 2014, I went to Charles Phillips Antiques in Theodore. That's this place right here. And I was looking for a farmhouse table for the Saraland house I was flipping. I had no plans to live in this bank repossession house past the time it took me to remodel it. I was going to work at the health department during the day and live in a construction zone at night. and make my money on this investment and move back to a McMansion in West Mobile. So here's a picture of me in the middle of replacing every single window in the house. But God had other plans. My house flooded in May of 2015. That's the water in the backyard there up to close to my knees, which means it equaled the same in my house. It wasn't much water. It looks a lot worse there than it is, but it was just enough to make a mess and accelerate my timetable of remodeling my house. I had flood insurance, even though the body of water across the street from me, Norton Creek, wasn't deep enough to even float a paper boat in. A superstorm cell sat over Mobile Bay, dumping very large amounts of rain that day. And this was also the same day that several boats had capsized during a regatta race on the bay, if you remember that day. It was in May of 2015. It was the perfect combination of a perfect storm. Even the city of Saraland was in on the fun because it was their lack of properly maintaining the neighborhood storm drains that empty the groundwater back to Bayou Sara, which also contributed to my house flood. But all of that's fixed now. My house is the most improved house on the street. So you're welcome, neighborhood property values. Though it was frustrating to be living in a flooded construction zone, I had to be patient and allow God to control the timeline for when I was going to finish all of it. So back to Charles Phillips Antiques. Their farmhouse tables that I talked about earlier, they were $1,500 to $1,800 each. And though they were very beautiful and perfect for my space, I just couldn't swallow the price tag, ever. I sat down on the concrete floor of their barn next to the table I was interested in and hung my head low trying to figure out what my next move was going to be. Then I heard a still small voice say, "Look under the table." As I peeked under the table and looked up, I was able to see the table from a different perspective. I saw how it was constructed, and then I heard, "You can build this. It's just wood." So I built this table right here in 2014 for $98. All the materials, including the tax. It seats 8. So now, 9 years later, I still haven't filled up all the seats for a meal or a gathering. So why did I build a table for 8 when there were significantly less than that of people living in my house at the time? Patience is why. 9 years is nothing for God. Remember, his ways are higher than our ways, and his heaven's eye view is different than our world eye view. I had grandiose plans back in 2014, and I needed a large farmhouse table for a lot of gatherings. Those haven't happened yet, but my table is patiently waiting. God planted the seed in me in 2014 to build it, knowing that one day I would harvest the blessing of sitting at my dinner table with 7 other people. So you have to be patient to allow God's plan to materialize, which is another bold, fill up the screen statement. So what do you do in the meantime while you patiently wait for God? For one, you keep praying. You don't ever give up on praying even when God seems so far away. And you keep trusting. It's relatively easy to have faith when things are going well, but the test of faith is when things do not appear to be going well at all. And then you also keep rejoicing. David said, "My heart rejoices in your salvation, and I'm celebrating your rescue." And you keep worshiping. As you begin to praise and worship God, it brings perspective to your problems. Sometimes I find it helpful to look back on my life and thank the Lord for bringing me through so many of my own personal struggles, disappointments, and bereavements. And to remember how through it all, He has been good to me. And you keep following Jesus. Delay does not negate the promises of God, and God does not always change our situations immediately. Sickness and suffering will not finally be eradicated until Jesus returns. Our experience of miracles and healings are just a foretaste of what will happen then when we get there. And you keep petitioning for healing. There are a few things more painful than seeing your own child suffering. The Canaanite woman's daughter was suffering terribly. This mother must have cried out in her heart, "How long, O Lord?" But she kept on asking for healing and refused to be discouraged by the fact that Jesus did not seem to be answering her request. She came and kneeling, worshiped him and kept praying, "Lord, help me." Jesus saw that she had great faith and he healed her daughter. So I talked about those fruits of the Spirit earlier, Galatians 5:22. So let's go ahead and put that, there we go. But the fruit that the Spirit produces in a person's life is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Patience, what I'm speaking about tonight, is just one of these. I have been trying forever to memorize this whole verse, but I can't get past the patience part. So kind of ironic, isn't it? But patience is a fruit of the Spirit. There's a pattern of waiting and being patient in the Bible. Could you be patient in a den of hungry lions as you waited on God to save you from being eaten? For example, Noah built an ark and waited 120 years for the flood that God said would come. Abraham and Sarah waited for a son that God promised would be born. And Moses waited to lead the Israelites out of slavery. The Israelites waited for the rescue from Egypt and then waited again as they made their way to the promised land. Joshua waited for the promised land. Hannah waited and prayed for a child. Rachel waited and prayed for a child. Daniel waited in the lion's den. David waited for Saul's reign to be over so he could be king. Lazarus had to wait 4 whole days before Jesus raised him from the dead. The prophet Elijah waited for rain, and Job waited for his suffering to end. And Paul waited for release from prison. And everyone waited on the Messiah that God had promised. But right now, I'm not feeling so good. I'm having good days and bad days. Today is actually kind of a atypical good day. But I've been kind of sick. I've had medical appointments. I have one actually coming up this Monday on the 25th. I've had this appointment since February the 5th, and I've been waiting 8 weeks to see an internist. My doctor's called to try to move me up. I've tried to call to get myself on a waiting list, and I told the internist I can be there in 20 minutes from Saraland, maybe even 15 if they had an opening, right? But he's triple booked. He stays busy, and he's the top internist in this area. So what do? I exercise patience, and I know that God is going to take care of me. I know that God is going to take care of me. My medical problems didn't start until we started speaking about putting together our Lenten devotional this year, and God started speaking to me about having these Friday night services during Lent. That's when you know that you're on to something good. That's when the spiritual warfare begins. We talked about that a lot, even at work. Is my work cheering section over here. They've all left, and they've all left me there. But that's when you know you're onto something good, is when spiritual warfare begins in your life. If God brings it to you, he will see you through it. Having daily blood loss, low iron, low hemoglobin counts, the absence of mature red blood cells, nausea, dizziness, and weakness isn't enough to stop me from doing what God told me to do. If these symptoms haven't stopped me, there's no reason why you can't be patient and lean into God and continue to pray for the blessings that you need in your life. Do we remember Paul's thorn that he talked about in 2 Corinthians 12:7? I'll paraphrase here a little bit. Paul said, I begged the Lord 3 times to take this problem away from me. But the Lord said, my grace is all you need. Only when you are weak can everything be done completely by my power. So I will gladly boast about my weakness. Then Christ's power can stay in me. I can relate to Paul a lot. I've begged the Lord to take this thorn from me and get me back to feeling like myself again. Liz, over here, mentioned to me that perhaps my illness was God telling me that I needed to slow down, maybe divest myself from so many projects and learn to rest just a little bit more. It was during our night of praise and worship that we held this past Sunday where it was confirmed to me as I sat right there that I needed to slow down. So I believe that when I slow down and learn how to take time for myself again, that I will be healed. I have to give myself grace as I learn to say no more often and be patient with myself by not trying to take on so many projects. Is there something right now that is your thorn? Is there something that you're asking God to take away from you right now, but he just hasn't done it yet? Are you impatient and you don't feel like you can wait on the Lord? I think we've all felt like that. Is there a situation that you're growing impatient about and you just need to give it up to God? If so, the altar is open. So I say, join me here at the altar. And whatever that thorn is, let's leave it at the foot of the cross. So we're going to play some music. And if you want to join me down here, we're going to leave it. We're going to be patient. We're going to leave it here tonight and ask God to take it away, because that's how change happens.